Well, welcome once again to Calaveras Living. Now, I hope a lot of people out there are interested in aviation. It's one of the great, passions of my life, and many other people around here. There's some great airports around here. But if you're familiar with aviation, get aviation magazines or even magazines about home builds. I hope you're aware that people can build their own planes, sometimes from kits, sometimes from scratch if they're really experienced. But our guest today has gone a step further than that. He is building a Spitfire, one of the legendary planes, fighter planes from the Second World War, and we're going to talk about how he's progressing and see some film about that. And his name is Russ Harmuth. Russ, Good to see you.
Thank you.
And you have taken it. Home builds, some of the kits are pretty simple by your standards, right?
Oh, yeah. I built an RV-7 for a gentleman, and of course the computer technology and aluminum that they brought in with that was just incredible. You had sheet metal that you would put on the wings or on the tail feathers, and all the holes. I mean, it already had all the holes pre-drilled.
Yeah.
And all you had to do is just cleco it to the ribs and ream them out and rivet them.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's kits out there that's really complicated and takes a lot of what I want to say, a little ingenuity to get them together.
You've restored a number of planes, though, right, in your day?
Yeah, I did restorations for 38 years.
Oh, wow.
Antiques, some of the antiques that I did was a 1929 Curtiss Robin, and did several Stearmans. I've done like 9 or 10 Stearmans. A Stearman is a biplane from World War II that they use as a primary trainer. They call them PT-17 or PT-13, depending on if it was Navy or the version of it or whatever.
What was your background for being so mechanically adept?
Years ago when I got out of high school, I was accepted to San Francisco State, and I was going to get into, mathematics and whatnot like that. And I said, you know what? My dad was in aviation all his life, and I'm going to do that. And I hired on to United Airlines as an apprentice mechanic.
Oh, okay. So a lot of your training was there, huh?
Yeah, I spent 4 years and graduated from the apprenticeship. Then I spent 8 months upstairs in design engineering draftsman, doing the baggage loader for the 747 DC-10, which was really an experience. And then they sent me back down on the floor, and I go, I don't want to do this. I said, the heck with this. So I moved to the mountains.
And how long have you been up here now?
That was in 1969.
Oh,
so
boy.
Been up here 43 years.
Oh, wow. And did you right away start
Now, actually, no. I went to work for a place called Hayton Weatherby, which used to be right here, over here where the water district is. Right here, yeah. And I worked there for 6 months, and I can't remember if it was Mr. Weatherby or Mr. Haight, but said if he had to give up his $110,000 salary, that the place would go bankrupt, and it did.
And that gave it up for him, huh?
Yeah. So then I still needed a job. I had a wife and a young daughter, and I went to work as a laborer, and I worked at that for 5 years and learned what it was like to be on the bottom.
Good. And then when did you get started back in aviation?
Well, after that, then I ran a backhoe and drove a 10-wheel dump truck for about 6 months or so, and then I went to work for PG&E and as a map draftsman.
Yeah.
And while I worked for United, I had my A&P license, which is the airframe power plant license. I used to go over to Columbia and do annuals, in off hours from working at PG&E. Yeah. So I was sitting at my desk one day after 5 years at PG&E, and I go, Lord, I said, I'm going to try to hawk my house, and if you approve of that, the loan will go through. Yeah. And here I am.
And here you are, and you've been in restorations and building and ever since. Okay.
Yeah, I built my shop, and it took, me and my wife sat down and wrote out 2,000 letters to begin with, and I went through the aviation directory and sent it to all these people that had airplanes.
Yeah.
I do restorations, Yeah. And I got 1 or 2 jobs out of that. And then after I got those jobs and they went to air shows and people saw them, I just started going by word of mouth.
So it's been good ever since.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Now I got to ask you, why a Spitfire? How did you decide to build a Spitfire?
Well, my favorite airplane is a Corsair.
Oh, with the gull wings?
Yeah, but I'm sure you're
Now
familiar.
we're looking at a picture of that. That's the Spitfire, and that's the way it looked in the Second World War.
Yep.
How many of them were made? Quite a few?
There was, I looked that up the other day. Ed asked me to take a look. It was 12,129.
Wow.
And that includes from the Mark 1 all the way to the Mark 26.
Wow. And that was the premier fighter for the British during the Second World War, is that right?
Actually, the one before the Spitfire was a Hawker Hurricane.
But it wasn't as fast as this, or?
No, it wasn't as maneuverable, didn't have as much ability as the Spitfire did.
Yeah. Okay. And I interrupted you. Why did you choose the Spitfire then to build?
Well, like I said, my favorite airplane was a Corsair, but if you're familiar with a Corsair, it's a huge airplane. I mean, it is really big. I got a chance to go to Oshkosh, and Paul Poberenzi, the founder of EAA.
He's well known.
He gave me a personal tour of the place, and we went to the Warbirds hangar there, and I got to get in a Corsair. And to get in a Corsair, the first step is on the flap. The next step is up on the wing, and there's 2 more steps on the side of the fuselage before you step into the cockpit.
Oh, wow.
It gives you an idea.
Yeah, how big it
is.
It's a carrier plane too, huh?
Yeah. And I go, well, what's my next favorite airplane? Was a Spitfire, and I just happened to come across this article in the EAA magazine about a fellow in the UK that built a full-size replica out of wood, and but he powered it with a Jaguar V12 engine. And I go, well, why build a full-size airplane if you're not going to put a full-size engine in it?
Yeah.
So I got a hold of his designer, Ray Hilborn, and he wanted like $30,000 to re-stress the airframe.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I think I can do a little better than that. And I found a guy in Colorado, Highlander Incorporated, and he did all the re-stress for me and everything, and we incorporated some stuff from the de Havilland mosquito bomber with the plywood, balsa wood plywood skins, really, really strong and light, and that's where it all started.
Okay, good. Well, we have a clip. Runs about 7 or 8 minutes, and it's it's about you working in your shop. Right?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, if you'll run that, we'll take a look here on our monitor and make some comments afterwards.
Okay. Hi, my name's Russ Harmuth. 12 years ago, I started this project as it was going to be my project. And about 3 or 4 years into the project, I had a bunch of people say, well, why don't you make plans and kits so that we can build the same thing? So 12 years later, here we are. I'm finally getting around to putting the wings on it, and I should have been flying it by now. But I do have 8 builders worldwide that are building the thing, and we're all having a good time. It's a full-size Spitfire replica. The real airplane was all aluminum, and the real airplane also had a V12 engine, but it was, of course, a British Rolls-Royce Merlin, and this is a General Motors Allison. It's also 1,200 horsepower. The designer that re-stressed the airframe from the plans that I bought from a gentleman in the UK runs an outfit in Colorado called Highlander Incorporated, and he stressed it for the Allison. And what I'm doing right now is I'm fitting the wing spars to the fuselage with, it seems like, about 10,000 bolts. But I guess they're all necessary to keep the wings on, which is real important to the pilot. The airplane will end up about 1,000 to 1,500 pounds lighter than original Mark 9 with the same horsepower, due to the fact that it doesn't have armament, no machine guns, no ammunition, and there's no armor plate behind the seat of the pilot, because we don't have to worry about getting shot down today, hopefully. Other than that, it's quite a project. The fuselage is covered with plywood, balsa wood plywood, and people that are familiar with racing boats know all about that construction. It's extremely strong and extremely light. The wings will be covered the same way. And that's pretty much it. I'm getting to the point to where once I get the spars bolted on, I'll be able to start fitting ribs and glue enough plywood on there to where I can take the wing home and finish it through color, bring it back down here, and I'll know that all the bolt holes will line up. A bit of history again on the Spitfire. I think it was one of the most various or variety of aircraft built. They had 20, I think it was 24 marks of Spitfire. Every mark was a different model due to a bigger engine, a different design in the airframe, a change in the landing gear, and whatnot. And the original airplane started out with a fixed wooden propeller, a two-bladed wooden propeller. And as the horsepower increased, also the technology for controllable props, it improved the performance quite a bit. And the British competition at the beginning of the war was the Messerschmitt Me-109. And the 109 was powered by a Daimler-Benz engine, which was a V12 engine also. Only the Germans installed it what we would call upside down, with the cylinders down and the crankcase up on top. Well, what that did is that means they had to turn the nose case around and put it, whether it be on top for their airplane or on the bottom of this airplane, and it put the prop shaft above the bottom of the engine, or in their case, the top of the engine. And what they did was they mounted a 20 millimeter or a 30 millimeter cannon, I'm not sure which, right on the top of the engine that would shoot right through the prop shaft. And they didn't have to rifle it because the propeller's already turning, so they just put they didn't have to put a twist in the rifling to impart a spin on the bullet because the propeller was already spinning. So they just put straight rifling through there. And it was a very accurate gun because it was right in line with the airplane. It wasn't out on the wings. It was right in line of sight with the pilot. And he knew right when he pointed the airplane at something that he was going to hit it. So out of the beginning of the war, the Messerschmitt was quite a bit of competition for the Spitfire. But as the war went on, the Germans didn't really advance the Messerschmitt that much, and the British did. They went with more and more horsepower, and finally toward the end of the war, of course, they had to go up against the Focke-Wulf 190, and that was a whole different ball game. The wing spars here have been designed at 10 G's ultimate load at 5,000 pounds gross weight of the airplane, and 450 knots, never exceed speed. And the designer chose Douglas fir for the timber to use in the construction, because it's about 10 times as strong as spruce, even though it's like 10, well, maybe not 10 times, it's 4 times as strong as spruce, and it's also 4 times as heavy. But in order to keep the wing thickness like the original, we had to go with the Douglas fir. And then the plywood, of course, is on there for shear load. And the attaching plates, there's a pile of them. This is one of them. They go on here like this. And at every seam right here where it crosses from the center section to the wing spar, there's 2 of these, top and bottom. So they're 1 inch thick on the front, top and bottom, 1 inch thick on the back, top and bottom. And since the bolts are going to be so long, in order to have these manufactured, it'd cost about $60 each, and there's 88 bolts that hold the wings on. I'm making my own. Thread the end, put a plain nut on there, weld it, thread the other end, and there's the bolt. Send it out and have it CAD plated, and it's ready to hold the wings on. Then the rest of the construction of the wing is a typical built-up construction out of wing ribs, and there's lots of those. There's 19 of them on each wing panel, of which there's only 8 of them laying here. But as an example, here's one of the ones that go in approximately here, and this is just in between the spars. There's also a nose rib that'll stick out to about here, and then the trailing edge sticks out another, good 18 inches or so right here. It's a good 2 feet back there. The wing root from the leading edge to the trailing edge is 9 feet. So it's a good sized wing when it's all together. Once the ribs are glued in place, then it gets covered with the plywood, similar to the fuselage, plywood, balsa wood, plywood. And I've already finished the tail plane. And it is indeed very, very strong and extremely light. And it's definitely the way to go.
Well, I actually could watch that. I wish you had it done a couple hours. You're a good narrator.
All right.
Now, you're fabricating most of the parts yourself, right?
Yeah, in fact, all of them.
All of
Well,
them.
there's a few things that I've farmed out. I've got a fellow up in up there near Sacramento, Elk Grove.
Elk Grove, uh-huh.
And he's ex-Air Force, and he's got a T6 that he's restoring. I'm sure you're familiar with that
Sure.
airplane, AT6.
Yeah, I've gotten to ride in one and do rolls.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But he's restoring one of those, and he builds the windscreen and the canopies for me.
Oh, good. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, any estimate when you're going to be finished?
I have a guy right now that we call him Mr. TK.
Uh-huh.
He wants a turnkey airplane. And I'm supposed to hear from him anytime in the next week or so. And I met him up at the Reno Air Races, nice gentleman. He owns a Stearman, a Pitts Special, and a DC-3.
Yeah. But he wants to buy it from you?
He wants, not my airplane,
Okay.
but he wants us to build him.
Oh, build one for him.
Call it turnkey airplane.
Okay. But this one that we saw, when will that be finished?
Well, if this gentleman comes through, I'm going to put 2 or 3 people to work.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be spending full time on my airplane, and hopefully I might have it flying by next summer.
Okay, good.
I'm working on the wings right now, doing the landing gear, got the gear legs all made and everything, doing the up and the down locks on them.
Now, when you eventually, Russ, when you get it finished, who comes out to check to see? Does somebody from the FAA come out and check it out?
Yeah. In fact, all they'll do is, when the airplane is ready to fly, they'll come out and inspect it, make a walk around or whatever, and they'll stand there and watch you fly once around the pattern.
Okay.
And if there's no anomalies or whatever, I've done this before with other airplanes. They sign it off and say, okay, now since it's a certified engine, has a certified prop, even though it's a home-built airplane, you have to stay within a certain radius of your airport and fly it for like 20 hours.
Oh, okay.
And if they feel that it needs more than that, they'll say 40 hours.
Okay.
And then after that time, after you fly that time and know you don't have any problems with it, then they sign it off to where you can go places with it.
And you'll be the first pilot, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've had your pilot's license how long?
I got it in 1967.
Oh, okay. That's when I got mine, too.
All right.
Yeah. Of course, I can't do what you can do.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
How much will that plane weigh? How much?
It's designed for a gross of 5,000 pounds.
5,000 pounds. Okay.
The original Mark 9 with all the armament, like cannons in the wings and like I was saying earlier about the armor plate in the back and everything. They were grossed, they called it all up weight, the British called it, was 7,800 pounds.
Any estimate how much this whole process costs to make that plane?
Well, it depends on if you do it from scratch, from the plans.
Like you did, yeah.
Like I'm doing.
Or the kids, yeah.
Yeah, the engine cost me, I bought it from a gentleman down in Arizona, and it was a brand new engine from the factory, but it was destined for a P-39. And of course, P-39, the nose case is totally different because the engine sat behind the pilot and it had the drive shaft up between his legs and went to a nose case in the front. So, anyway, I paid about 10 grand for that engine, and I got it overhauled. Total investment in that I bought a set of engine overhaul stands, and I traded those for a nose case and blah, blah, blah. I have about close to 20K in it.
Wow.
Which isn't bad, because if
Not for that, what kind of plane it is.
Oh, yeah, if you figure out horsepower per dollars,
Yeah.
like for overhaul.
Yeah.
If you figure a typical Lycoming that goes like in a Cessna 180 or whatever,
Sure.
if you figure out the cost per horsepower for that engine, it's like 3 times the cost of what a person would have in an Allison.
Of course, wouldn't it be nice if you'd gotten paid by the hour to yourself? Yeah, you got hundreds of hours.
Yeah, you don't figure your own time in, that's for sure.
Now, really, ultimately, is it the satisfaction of actually building it, and that's the accomplishment, or is the accomplishment of actually getting in and flying it?
That's probably 50-50, I would say. Yeah, I've done other airplanes. You know, in the past, I've restored airplanes for customers, and they go, well, would you fly it for me? Well, sure.
Yeah.
Like I restored a Stearman for a good friend of mine. It lived in Hayward, and it was serial number 1, 750001. And the only Stearman that was before that, well, they call it a Stearman because Lloyd Stearman kind of designed it on a piece of paper, but it was really built by Boeing, and that was the model number was 75. The only Model 75 built before that was the prototype.
Wow.
Anyway, I restored this airplane for him, and I called him. I said, Bud, your Stearman's ready to go. I said, come and get it. And he goes, I got to go to a meeting back in Chicago. He says, you want to fly it down to Hayward? I go, duh.
Yeah. Sure. Oh,
so I got 2 hours and 45 minutes and serial number 1 in my logbook.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, it must be a really accomplishment, all the hours you put in. I mean, some in your shop and then a lot at the airport.
Yeah.
And, of course, you need a lot of room once you get the plane together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the original Spitfire was for the single pilot, right? And
yes.
Aren't you working on putting it together a kit for passenger, 2 people?
Two-seater,
Yeah.
yes. There was a lady in the UK that had a 2-seater made for her, and it's just ideal because the British, they made one after the war for like training purposes.
Yeah.
But the rear seat had a rear canopy, and it looked kind of like a SR-71. Have you seen the 2-seater SR-71 with a great big bubble in the back?
No, I may have and didn't know it.
And it puts the student pilot or whatever up so that he can see over the front.
Yeah.
Well, what she did was they took the same canopy that's used in the front, and they put it in the back. And then where the radio gear was there's a plexi tunnel right there, and they flared it up to match the same matching windscreen curve as on the canopy in the front. Wow. So now you have 2 canopies that are identical.
Yeah.
And the one in the back it slides back and no problem. And the only thing they did there was they made the entry door in the front is about this wide, and then the one on the back is about half as wide because it's easier to get into, because from stepping from the wing, all you do is just swing your foot around and you're in the airplane.
Yeah. Now, how many Spitfires are still flying?
Gosh, that's really hard to say. There's probably, I'd say 20 or so, or 40.
Were actually from the war, huh?
Yeah.
And then how many, besides the one you're building and the kits you're selling, how many of those are flying, or they're not completed
None
yet?
of mine are flying.
Oh, they're not completed yet?
No, the prototype, mine's the one that's the closest right now.
Okay.
And I don't know if you noticed, it was mentioned on the thing there that I had 8 builders.
Yeah.
I now have 17 builders.
Oh, wow.
I've got 6 in the U.S., I got 4 in Australia, 1 in New Zealand, 1 in South Africa, 1 in the U.K., 1 in Sweden, and there was a guy in Austria that bought the plans so that he could just build a mock-up to put in his car.
And you're the one who came up with the plans, right?
Well, no, the original plans with Clive de Crow's, and we modified those with the Highlander restress.
But are you making parts to supply to those 17?
Some of them I do, yeah.
So actually, all of this after leaving PG&E has become pretty profitable and time-consuming, huh?
Yeah, it keeps me busy for sure. I mean, I'm retired, drawing Social Security, and when I worked for this gentleman down at Bud Field, I built 9 airplanes for him. We made a deal. He kind of put me on payroll, so I was a ghost carpenter in Oakland. And he got his airplanes restored for a ghost employee, and I got health insurance, and now I'm drawing retirement.
Wow.
So I got retirement from the Carpenters Union plus Social Security, and I'm busier now than I ever was.
Yeah, plus you're doing something you really like and do well.
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's really great.
Now, eventually, when yours is completed, and some of the kit planes, will they be like at air shows, or how will they be used?
That's primarily what they're for, is to fly to air shows, and we don't have the Merced flying anymore. That quit happening for political reasons or whatever. But my ultimate goal would be to go to the Reno Air Races. Mm-hmm. And one of the displays they have at the Reno Air Races is down to where the military display is, mm-hmm. and it's called the Rolls-Royce Invitational.
Oh, wow.
And
all warplanes, huh?
Well, no. They're just old airplanes.
Oh, yeah.
Because like this year we were there was a trimotor, Ford trimotor.
Oh, yeah, big one.
Really impressive. It's the first time I ever walked around one of those.
Looks like
things.
It's made of corrugated
iron.
Yeah.
And there was, a couple of Wacos there, and had an N3N, and just all kinds of different airplanes. But if you can convince them that, to get invited there, it's really something.
Yeah, well, a lot of people like to come and reminisce about aviation, huh?
Uh-huh.
I mean, or sometimes they learned to fly when they were young, or maybe flew in the war, or even later wars.
Yeah, because there's a military aircraft in there too that people brought. Last year, it wasn't there this year, but last year was a British, two-seater Seafire.
Oh, is there? Yeah. Boy, it's great to visit with you. I wish we had an hour. And just in closing, anything that people out there might want to know about putting that together, or what you've done that we haven't covered?
The only thing I can say is just go to my website and take a look at what's happening there, and my email address is on there. You can write to me and say.
Okay, yeah. You want to give me what's your website again?
It's www.spitfireaircraftco stands for company .com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they should be able to remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, if you go to Google and Google Spitfire, I'm at the top of the list.
That's good.
Yeah, it's
good to be at the top of some list. Huh?
Yeah, really. I hope I'm not on top of somebody's list.
Yeah. Well, it's good you've been able to do all these things, and you must have a lot of talent. You seem very humble about it, but what you're doing is hard to accomplish.
Well, plus over 38, 40 years, it's been a learning experience.
You're not 40. No, okay.
You learn how to weld, with a gas welder. You learn how to rivet. You learn, how to glue things. You learn how to run on all the different equipment. I found out planers are non-forgiving.
Well, you must be a very patient man, to accomplish what you're doing. It's really good to see you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, and good luck. And when you get it finished, come back and contact us, and then maybe we'll try to get some shots of it.
Oh, okay? Boy, when I get it finished, I'm going to have to sneak out there with the FAA and get that flight in, and then we'll do it the next day for the camera.
Okay, good. And we'll see you next time on Calaveras Living. Thanks a lot.